I do, yeah, it's all ready to go. It's just nested down below the screen there. Oh, yeah, we're live right now online. Correct, yeah, because none of the speakers are on. Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started for the folks online and just to be mindful of your time as well. State Representative Christina Sappi, and although this is not my meeting and it's not New Garden Township's meeting, we are so glad that you came out tonight. I'm really grateful to New Garden Township for having us here in their facility. I understand we have some supervisors from London Grove also, so thank you so much for coming. Just by way of background, shortly after I took office in 2018 or 2019, residents began coming to me with concerns about air quality in this area. And so we had a meeting here in the room with many of you I recognize. And then we had a smaller meeting after that where we decided that we would have what we wanted to request from the state was an air quality study. And so that request went to the administration, was considered and approved by 3 separate agencies, which is the process for an air quality study. So that was the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Department of Health. So tonight we have those departments here to present their findings from the air quality. DEP did the assessments and gathered the data. Department of Health analyzed and produced the report. So they'll be presenting you their findings tonight. And while there's a lot of folks here, it might look intimidating. You may have a lot of different questions and not one person can answer every question for each department. So I'm really grateful that they've taken the time to be here with us tonight to answer these questions. So they're going to make their presentation. We ask that you hold your questions and comments till they're done making their presentation. And then we have a microphone here so that you can queue up and tell us where you live, what township you're from, and ask your question to the appropriate agency. And if it's not 100% clear what agency your question should go to, feel free up here to decide that and answer those questions from the public. So thank you again all for coming. I would like to just recognize my colleague in the General Assembly, Senator Kane, is here tonight. And I know my colleague, Senator Committa's staff is online following as well. So thank you so much again for all coming tonight.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lisa McHugh. I'm actually the Bureau Director for the Bureau of Epidemiology at the Pennsylvania Department of Health and also the State Epidemiologist. Before I begin this evening with our report on our findings, I just wanted to first introduce our team here from the Department of Health just so that you're aware of who we all are. So I introduce myself, and the presenter this evening will be Dr. Julie Miller, who's a public health toxicologist with the Pennsylvania Department of Health. Along the edge over here is Dr. Wendy Braun, who's our Deputy Secretary, who oversees the Bureau of Epidemiology and a number of different bureaus. Dr. Carrie Hanley, who's the Assistant Bureau Director. Dr. Anil Nair, who is the Division Director of our Environmental Health Epidemiology, and Nathan McCrae, who's also one of our assessment individuals within our program. We also have our Director of Legislative Affairs, who's in the background, Dan Myers, and Barry Chickachop, who's also our Director of Communications here this evening with the Department of Health. So before we begin and I turn it over to Julie, I did just want to give a brief overview. As Representative Sappi had mentioned, there's a process that we follow when we go through this, and I just wanted folks to be aware of what that process looked like so that you understand a little bit about what we're doing here. And I'm reading because there are some acronyms that I don't have memorized, and so I apologize. I don't like reading from things, but that is why I have a little script here in front of me. So the Pennsylvania Department of Health, through the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, as you'll hear us call ATSDR, we receive federal funding through ATSDR's partnership to promote local efforts and reduce environmental exposures, or what you hear us call Apple Tree Program. which is a state cooperative agreement that we have with the federal agency. And so upon knowing about different concerns that the community has, we use ATSDR policies and guidance materials, and we conduct something that's called a health assessment. And so we look at different health hazards, different exposures the community might have, and we look for ways that we can actually do some analysis based on some of those exposures. And so often we need to partner with other agencies. In this particular case, the Department of Environmental Protection, who actually helps us collect information, collect data, in this case from monitors that you'll hear a little bit about in a few minutes. And they actually collect the data for us. We do not do that data collection at the department. And so, as Representative Sappi mentioned, there's a lot of collaboration that happens between departments. And so we then take some of that data, we do analysis based on standard methods that these federal agencies, ATSDR, provide to us. And we do that, and we do what's called a letter health consultation. It's a standard process that the federal agency advises, and we do standard epidemiologic analytic methods, and we produce a letter health consultation, which Julie is going to review kind of a little bit of the background and some of the findings associated with that report. And so what we in health really are focused on is what is the risk to the public, the potential health risk that might be impacting the public. And you'll hear Julie talk a little bit about some of those this evening. We then also have to partner. We do not regulate many of these industries. We are not a regulatory body at the Department of Health, and so that's why we do need to work with other agencies who have much more of the subject matter expertise and boots on the ground than we actually have. And so just wanted to explain a little bit about that process, a little bit about who's here this evening from our organization. And I will turn it over to Julie, who will talk a little bit about the actual analysis that was conducted and the findings.
Hi, everyone. Is this on? Okay. My name is Julie Miller. I'm a public health toxicologist with the Pennsylvania Department of Health. And I'm also the principal investigator for our grant that funds this work, which is our health assessment program. And so today, why are we here? We're going to talk about hydrogen sulfide, ambient or outdoor air levels of hydrogen sulfide in the area. So let's get right to the nitty-gritty. What were we asked to do? Basically, we were asked to determine whether outdoor air levels of hydrogen sulfide, sometimes referred to as H2S, in southern Chester County, which is where we're located today, collected near mushroom composting operations, and wanted to know, could it potentially harm the health of nearby residents? Over the last few years, we've received complaints related to and expressing of concerns related to unpleasant smells in the outdoor air, headaches, effects on asthma, so things like asthma exacerbations, and then, of course, outdoor metals corroding at an accelerated rate. In response to this request, we asked our excellent partners at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, who are the environmental monitor and sampling gurus, to collect this data for us. As Dr. McHugh had said, we don't collect a lot of the data. We rely on our partners who have expertise in this area to collect the information for us. So once we received that data, and that data monitoring started in August of 2021, we reviewed the data that was collected from August 2021 through December of 2022. And this was hourly data of hydrogen sulfide in the area, and it was collected from 3 different monitors. But what is hydrogen sulfide gas? So it's a flammable, colorless gas, and it smells like rotten eggs. It can come from natural and man-made sources. So natural sources can be things like volcanoes, natural gas. And I'll group it into man-made sources. It also comes from bacterial breakdown of organic matter. We actually produce hydrogen sulfide in our bodies every day from the bacteria in our mouth and in our gut as we try to digest different foods such as proteins. This can also be produced from certain bacteria during the making of mushroom substrate. And you could smell it in the air even at very low levels. Hydrogen sulfide, you may have heard, has a very low odor threshold, meaning your nose can detect it at very low levels, far below levels that may cause harm, and even maybe below levels that we can detect with monitoring capabilities. And it's also important to know that there's a wide range of this odor threshold, meaning some people may be able to detect it at much lower levels, and they may be more sensitive to the smell than others. And low levels, some type of health effects that may be experienced are respiratory effects, irritation. Hydrogen sulfide gas is an irritant, and you can also experience headaches, fatigue, and similar effects. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of this study, just a note on chemical exposures and health effects in general. So being exposed to a chemical doesn't mean that you're going to get sick. The Department of Health evaluates the potential risk to health. So based on the levels that we see and who is exposed, is there a more or less likelihood that you may be experiencing health effects related to that chemical? And whether or not someone gets sick from a chemical depends on many different factors. This could be the chemical properties, the levels that are in the environment, how you're exposed. Are you eating it? Are you drinking it? Are you inhaling it? Is this something that may affect your skin? And then the length and frequency of the exposure. So are you exposed to a short period of time? Are you exposed in multiple waves over the course of a day, of a year? And then, of course, the overall health of an individual and underlying health conditions. Some people are more sensitive to things in the air than others. If you have underlying health conditions such as asthma, such as COPD, you may be more sensitive to outdoor air quality and air pollution. And then finally, genetics, age, sex, and developmental stage are important to understand all the factors that go into whether or not a chemical is going to cause adverse effects. So again, the effect hydrogen sulfide has on each person may be different. Some people may have an effect and some people may not have an effect at all. So where did Pennsylvania Department of Health or Department of Environmental Protection monitor? Well, the first monitor location you'll see on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, that's what we refer to as the Landenberg monitor. It was actually here. So we measured it right at the town hall, and that was our Landenberg monitor, and it's near general composting areas to the west. And then there's the West Grove monitor that is up in at the top left of the screen. And again, that's near another general composting area. And then finally, we have the third monitor, which may be referred to as the airport monitor or background monitor. So what we mean by background is there isn't necessarily a large producer of hydrogen sulfide or a source in the area. So what's the background of hydrogen sulfide in this general area? So now that we know where the data was collected from, how long we collected and what we collected, what did we do with that data? So again, we use standard public health assessment methods that were developed by the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, or ATSDR. And using those public health assessment methods, we assessed whether hydrogen sulfide in outdoor air levels were at levels that could potentially harm health to nearby residents. And again, in our assessment, we considered the potential for non-cancer health effects. It's important to note that hydrogen sulfide has not been shown to cause cancer. So that's the reason we're looking at non-cancer health effects. And so things like non-cancer health effects are anything under the umbrella that isn't cancer. And we also considered different exposure lengths. So acute, that'll be up to 14 days of exposure. Intermediate, which would be anything from 15 days to 364 days. And then chronic duration is you being exposed to something for more than a year. We compared all of these exposures to ATSDR and EPA guidelines, and we compared this to the health effect levels for hydrogen sulfide gas. We also wanted to look at trends in the data. Are there certain times of day, certain days of the week, and certain times of the year that you might be seeing fluctuations in hydrogen sulfide levels? What time of day, what time of year are we seeing those elevations or lower levels of hydrogen sulfide? So the meat of what we found was that the highest hourly hydrogen sulfide levels at the West Grove monitor and then Landenberg, again, where we're here today, may have led to short-term, also referred to as acute, respiratory effects in certain individuals. And it's important to note that certain individuals portion. This is for sensitive populations, specifically people with asthma. So when we compare this to levels that were shown in the literature that could potentially affect people that have mild to moderate asthma, and the levels that were seen in the monitored data collected from these monitors could potentially pose a risk to these sensitive populations. But we also found that it was only during certain hours and certain days that these levels were getting close to these potential thresholds of risk. And exposures of longer duration, so that intermediate, remember 15 to 364 days, or longer term, such as the chronic exposure, so over a year, they're not likely to lead to longer term health effects. So things that we would think of as being irreversible health effects. And again, you might think, well, why is something an acute health hazard, but not a long-term hazard, right? And that's because when these levels are averaged over a longer period of time, you can imagine the level is much lower. And then because of these fluctuations in the hydrogen sulfide levels, and so because it's averaged over that longer period of time, it's actually much lower than the levels than we would expect to see adverse health effects. We also wanted to note that levels were above common hydrogen sulfide odor thresholds. And the odor thresholds we're talking about, again, remember it could be a wide range for people. Some people are more sensitive to the smell than others. And the threshold we used to look at were 8 parts per billion, and that's just a unit of measurement for the air, and then 30 parts per billion of hydrogen sulfide. And we found that 28 to 13% of the hours monitored near the site respectively. So for the 8 parts per billion, 28% of the hours monitored were above these odor thresholds, and 13% of the hours monitored were above the 30 parts per billion threshold. Again, these are odor thresholds, so you can smell it. But again, just because you can smell it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to result in adverse health effects, but environmental odors like hydrogen, those that come from hydrogen sulfide gas, could lead to headache, nausea, fatigue, and even stress in some people. You're smelling it, maybe you're stressing out about it because, I'm being exposed to something. So that's a normal and okay response. So if we look over the course of the year and a half that the data was being collected, you can see that there are certain trends in the data. And we'll go into that a little bit further in a bit. But at the Landenberg monitor, so where we're located today, you can see that there are elevations of hydrogen sulfide gas, and this is for the daily average of hydrogen sulfide. You can see that generally in the fall months, so August to maybe early December, there's a more frequency of those higher detections of hydrogen sulfide gas. And then in the summer, it is lower. So again, also, this is at the West Grove monitor, much to a lower extent in terms of the elevated levels that were observed in the data monitored. We can see that there were elevated levels, but there aren't as many orange, red, and purple as you saw on the previous screen. So I'm going to show you a lot of pictures, but we're going to dive right into it right after this, so don't be alarmed. But what I wanted to give you on this screen is that there's a large range of data, and because this data was collected, we have hour averages over the course of an entire year and a half. We can analyze trends in the data to see when during times of day, month, and time the times of the week, when are the hydrogen sulfide levels the highest. So again, we'll go into the next slide here. So first, let's look at daily trends. Is there a time of day when hydrogen sulfide is the highest? So you could see 0 on the left bottom of the x-axis here, and that is actually midnight. And then once you go up to 23, 11 o'clock at night. So you can see that the highest levels actually occur between midnight and about 6, 7 a.m. In the morning. They dramatically drop down, and then they start to go back up in the nighttime hours. But why is that? And that's because of the properties of hydrogen sulfide gas and where we live and meteorologic conditions. So when we typically see trends like this, so hydrogen sulfide gas is heavier than air, so it'll tend to stick closer to the ground when the winds are calm. The winds are calmest at night and in the very early morning hours. There's also things called temperature inversions. where because of the pressure in the air, the heavier chemicals such as, hydrogen sulfide and many other types of pollutants can kind of hover closest to the ground. And then when the temperature inversion breaks, there's more dispersion, and then you see the drop off of the hydrogen sulfide gas. What about which weekdays are, the highest levels that are observed? We found that generally on Tuesdays and Fridays, they're likely to have the highest elevations of hydrogen sulfide gas. And then what about over the course of the year? Is there a certain season that we smell it more? Is there a certain season that hydrogen sulfide is higher? And what we did find is that it is in the fall months when those levels are the highest, and they start to drop off once you enter the new year, January through the middle of the summer. And again, this is kind of what we expected based upon meteorologic conditions and the temperature inversions that typically happen in the fall months. So in summary, what all did we find? That levels near mushroom composting areas were often the highest at night and early morning, again, based on the trends of meteorologic conditions and the properties of hydrogen sulfide gas. We found that during the fall season, so roughly August through November, early December, or when we were seeing the highest daily averages, and then on Tuesdays and Fridays. The lowest levels were observed on Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays. But it's important to note that mushroom growing and composting operations occur year-round. So this isn't some, change in, their operations as to why maybe the levels are higher in the fall than they are in the winter. It's mainly due, and it potentially is influenced by these seasonal changes in weather patterns. Hydrogen sulfide and other sulfur-based gases, again, heavier than air, they can accumulate at ground level in the late evening, nighttime, and early morning hours when the winds are generally calmer. Once those winds pick up, it gets dispersed and migrates out of the area. So what are our conclusions from this study? That hydrogen sulfide levels at the monitors nearest to mushroom operations may have led to short-term respiratory effects, particularly in sensitive populations. So again, those sensitive populations being people with underlying respiratory conditions like asthma. Longer-term health effects are unlikely, but we have to admit, sometimes more research needs to be known to understand the health effects in people from long-term low-level exposures of hydrogen sulfide gas in the general population. Common hydrogen sulfide odor threshold. So again, not necessarily a level where you're going to have any type of adverse health effects, but something that you can definitely detect with your nose. They were regularly exceeded, which could lead to nausea, fatigue, headache, and even stress in some people. The levels were the highest during nighttime and early morning hours and during the fall months. And since it is outside the scope of our health evaluation, the Department of Health wasn't able to come to any conclusions regarding the corroded outdoor metals complaints that we had received. So what are our public health recommendations? First, one of our recommendations is that facilities suspected of high hydrogen sulfide emissions engage in best practices and engineering controls to reduce odors. Efforts should be made to significantly reduce hydrogen sulfide levels to be lower and or to ensure that hydrogen sulfide emissions are located away from residential areas. Entities may want to consider having future air monitoring in the area and share that data with stakeholders in the community so that you're aware of the levels that are present on a given day. Again, residents should consult their physicians if you're experiencing health issues. So if you're someone that has asthma and you're experiencing maybe an asthma attack, maybe you need to use your rescue inhaler. Maybe you need to, visit your physician and discuss those reactions that you're having. And then finally, this one's probably difficult, but something within your control is that you can stay indoors when outdoor odors are bothersome and potentially leaving the area if you can. But again, residents with asthma or other respiratory conditions, you might want to consider, again, looking at those trends in the hydrogen sulfide levels, you might want to consider the time of day. So remember, really, really early morning hours or nighttime are when the levels are the highest. And then also consider, the season. The fall is when we were observing higher levels when you're planning outdoor exercise or activities. So what are some of our next steps? The Department of Health intends to participate in meetings with stakeholders and discuss outdoor hydrogen sulfide levels and other concerns in the area. We also may consider a review of additional hydrogen sulfide data for the area if it's representative of community exposures and of sufficient quality. So that was a lot of information. You may not have seen when you came in, but we do have print-offs of the fact sheet and some relevant environmental odor fact sheets out in the hallway to grab before you leave. But this is all posted online as well, the full report and the fact sheet. And again, if you have any questions, we're always open. We have a environmental health concern electronic form that you could fill out that'll go directly to our team, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. And there's our phone number if you're interested in contacting us. But thank you. I was gonna say, I'll turn it over to DEP.
Hey, so good evening. My name is Nick Laser. I'm the Bureau Director for the Bureau of Air Quality in Harrisburg. Before I get started my piece, and I don't have a lot to add because Dr. Miller did an awesome job covering the data that we collected. But again, I'm Nick Laser. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Air Quality out of Harrisburg. I've got Larry Hawley, who's the Director of the Bureau of Waste, right? And I got Chris Soloway, who's on Larry's team, and then Pat's going to introduce the folks here from the
I can do it from right here. Good evening, everybody. My name's Pat Patterson. I'm the Regional Director for the Department of Environmental Protection. First off, want to thank Representative Sappi and Senator Kane for their leadership on this issue and in pulling this information session together. The regional office is here. You know, the bureaus have done a lot of work with the data gathering for this, and we're here because we're regional, we're local, and we've been kind of fielding a lot of the phone calls and the questions and concerns from your neighbors over the period of the last few years. So with us tonight, I do have our regional program manager for waste management, Sean Mountain. And in the back, we have our regional communications manager, Stephanie Berardi, and our local government liaison, Lisa Strobridge, is here. And I see he probably doesn't want me to introduce him, but Chris Strohmeyer here from the County Conservation District. We do a lot of cooperative work with the district, and when it comes to doing inspections and responding to some of the questions and complaints we may get about the industry out here. So with that, I'll let Nick talk about the data collection.
Awesome. Thank you. So just want to take a few minutes to talk about what the department did and why and where. So if you've lived in the community for a while, you might recall the department and Department of Health did a study back in 1998, 1999, focusing on many of the same issues. So we wanted to take a look and touch back to that study. And so when we looked at the series of complaints that were being received by the regional office, a lot of them had that feel for reduced sulfur compounds, the hydrogen sulfide, and that's one of the compounds we look for in the original study. That's one of the things we focused on for the hydrogen sulfide for a couple of reasons, mostly that because we had to touch back to the original study, and we had the equipment as well as we could do this. So when we look at like the West Grove monitor at the Avon Grove Charter School, that is a touchback to the original study. In the 1998-99 study, we actually had a site there at the time. The Landenberg monitor, which is right down the road, right outside the front door here, we placed here for the simple reason of we were on a very compressed time schedule to get these sites out to meet the governor's priority, to try to get some information to assist the community. When we put out an air monitoring site for a permanent location, it generally takes us somewhere between 9 and 18 months to get a permanent location out. And so when we do that, it takes a lot longer than we really had the opportunity to take the time to do for this project. Before I forget, I don't want to forget the airport monitor is at the Talking-Gettleman Airport. That's one of our continuous sites. We've had that there for almost 20 some odd years. And that gives us, as Dr. Miller said, it gives us a background outside of what we expect to have an impacted area. So we were able to give us a third monitoring site. So one of the challenges, again, like I said, it's usually somewhere between 9 and 18 months for us to do that. We generally try to aim for public property. because there is a length of time we're looking for. And also there's a bunch of siting criteria we have to meet. We have to be so far away from trees and roadways and houses and buildings. And this site in particular provided us a great opportunity to do that. We weren't able to put a full site in at the West Grove, at the Avon Grove charter site, simply because of the space involved. And so one of the reasons we have a little bit more of a challenge with the data there is because of the shelter and the heating and cooling that we had there. And so the equipment didn't respond as well. As you might understand, it's scientific equipment. It took a little bit of, it takes a lot of care and feeding. So the last thing I'll say on this, and again, like I said, Dr. Miller did a great job summarizing the data, is that ambient air monitoring can confirm the presence of something. And when you add that to meteorological data, you can get a general direction of where that is coming from. But what it cannot do is it cannot point directly to an individual facility or facilities. Right, so I can tell you it's in the community. I can tell you roughly where it's coming from, match that up with wind speed, wind direction, give you a rough idea of where things are coming from. So all the meteorological data that Dr. Miller presented was from the data collected on site. But what it can't do is say it's this pollutant is coming from this facility. And that's where the follow-up will coming from that I think we're going to turn over to the Department of Ag next, right?
Yeah, this is Doug Wolfgang, the Director of the State Conservation Commission. With me is Stephen Rudman, Legislative Director for the Department of Agriculture. And we don't necessarily have a prepared presentation, but the State Conservation Commission operates under joint authorities of the Departments of Agriculture and Environmental Protection. We provide funding and resources for the 66 county conservation districts across the state, including Chester County. Chris Strohmeyer is here. And we provide a handful of funding opportunities for ag best management practices across the state. We have historic funding levels right now for that effort. But just speaking on behalf of the department here, that we, acknowledge the concern, absolutely. And we want to help address the issue in a way that protects the public health as a priority, but also represents the interests of the ag industry. Last week, I asked the commission to approve $1.5 million in research funding out of our nutrient management admin funds with this in mind, with this issue in mind. So that would make that pot of funding eligible then for, or available then for institutions to apply for to do research. Penn State University has already expressed an interest in doing a research project here. And hopefully others would be interested as well. We know Westchester University has already done some work. But we hope to award this funding in spring and have signed contracts through the Department of Agriculture's regular ag research program by the end of June. So this is a short-term thing that we're hoping to award. But we believe that's the first step. We think researching this to identify clearly where the source of the gas is coming from, whether it be the compost piles, the substrate, the lagoons, and what those levels are from each of those different locations and areas. We think that's step one. And then step two, that important thing of identifying the best practices to mitigate the effects of it. And to define then as part of that through that research, what's feasible for Pennsylvania, because what works for Netherlands may not necessarily work for the type of structure that we have here with farming in Pennsylvania. So we feel that's an important part. And then third key to this would be providing the technical and financial assistance that would be necessary for farmers to install the types of practices that would mitigate the effects of it. And we would do this in partnership with USDA. We have, Tim Peters here from NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. We have Chris Strohmeyer from the Conservation District. We'd make this a high priority with our conservation partnerships in order to deploy some meaningful practices then that would be mitigating this effort, the effects of it. But with that is also then the need for long-term monitoring to ensure that the community concerns are met as well. So additional support in the upcoming budget we feel would be critical piece to this as well. So that's something that we definitely should keep in mind. But this is our recommended strategy. I mean, the businesses that are affected with this are very concerned and they want to work with us to identify what those practices are. And, obviously the mushroom industry in Pennsylvania is huge. It's a huge sector of our ag economy, and we lead the nation in mushroom production. And that's something that we take, very seriously, along with the issue here related to public health. So finding that balance and being able to do some meaningful mitigation strategies, I think is very high level on our priority list right now. But that's basically what we have in mind from the ag structure. The actual practices that are out there. I know that NRCS has been working with the County Conservation District and with mushroom producers over the past several years to implement BMPs, best management practices, more so related to water quality with the effluent. But, we certainly would make the hydrogen sulfide gas emission issue a priority for any BMP that we would fund hereafter. But happy to take any, questions, or if you have any discussion related to that. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. So if we've concluded the presentation part of it, I think this is where we have the opportunity now for you all to ask questions of any of the agencies that are before us. So if you have a question, we'd ask that you come to the microphone and tell us your name and where you live, like the way you would if you were in a Board of Supervisors meeting, so that we know how to address your question. And then just ask your question if you know who to direct it to, and if you don't know, they'll answer it. And if any of the supervisors have questions, just, come to the mic as well. So I think it's on, right?
It's on.
Yeah. Okay. Did you hear him?
Just to kind of keep an orderly performance, just to kind of form a line for those who want to get up and ask questions. So I'm imagine there are in the audience, and then just kind of sequence out and kind of in and out circulating. So, but you don't have to feel like you have to come up one at a time.
Hi, my name is Dan Ferlano. New Garden Township. I live on Daniel Drive, not too far from here. Thank you for the presentation. Sounds like a lot of good information. Two basic questions. One is, what's the implementation plan as far as timeline? I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but when's it going to happen? And my second question is, the locations you chose, I understand, because obviously you had to put in physical equipment. But the reality is that a lot of this smell, I believe, comes from spent compost, not necessarily from what they're doing over here, which is also a problem. But I don't know how you would, and there's a lot of variation in the farms. There's some that are very well managed, and there's some that aren't. So I don't know if you're going to attack that too. So those are two questions.
Yeah, those are good. I'll just speak to that on the ag side of things, and just looking to how we implement water quality best management practices and prioritize those farms that have the greatest need. So, I think in short term, we would need to identify, number one, what is the farms that have the greatest need? And then in terms of what the greatest impact would be, what is the practice that we can put on the ground? There are a lot of moving parts to that, to your point. I mean, what's the timeline for that? So the research part of it, we feel that we can get signed contracts for research by the end of this fiscal year, by the end of June. But maybe there are things out of the Westchester study or other studies that we could use that we could help inform our decisions more in the short term. We would look at our funding sources, our financial assistance, technical assistance programs that we have in the commission, and that we work with through the County Conservation District and through our partnership with USDA, to see if there's some practices that we could install, in the short term and help to fund through some of our programs. That would be a priority for sure. That would be the intent for sure. We want to keep the community engaged and, in the know of what we have going on for sure on the ag side. Yes, sir.
Don Morgan. I'm from New Garden Township in Hartfeld. You're well aware, according to the comments you made, that there's testing being done by a university professor recognizing hydrogen sulfide is heavy in air, he has found the low spots in the township. Can I get a commitment from you people to use his data in a study?
If there are, if there's meaningful data that we can use that's already been done and that puts more implementation on the fast track, in my opinion, absolutely, we need to consider that.
What about the health department?
So the health department's willing to review any data that's of sufficient quality and representative community exposures. And we have been in discussions with Dr. Sena at Westchester University. So we are aware of his study. And I know that he wanted to collect at least a year's worth of data. So, we're always open to reviewing additional data.
And I have a question for the agriculture department. Carl Diamond is an odor coordinator, but says when you move a pile of poop from a concentrated animal operation to a mushroom farm, you can't do anything about it. Seems a little ridiculous to me.
Yeah, that's again, the research and the parts that are in there and the ways that other strategies that others are using in other countries to mitigate that and help to capture that gas. I mean, maybe there's opportunity built into that. That's certainly something that we'll make a priority to research and find out. But your point is taken.
Is that a commitment to move beyond just the concentrated operations to come out to where they're composting?
You certainly have a commitment that will research and check into whatever strategies we can deploy on the ag side. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Steve Alabam, New Garden Township. I'm actually a supervisor here. I guess my questions would be pointed at DEP air quality. Can we get a commitment to at least get the monitoring station back here, knowing that there is levels that are exceeding standards?
So as, the air monitoring program is a statewide program. We're about to kick off a big project down in Delaware County. Thank you. Sorry, brain freeze for the moment. So we have limited resources. We could definitely take a look at seeing if we can find the bandwidth to bring a monitor back. If we can, we'll do what we can to see if we can bring one back.
Yeah, now that we have somewhat of a baseline and we have spikes on different days of the week, another concern would be if the industry operates 24/7, 365 days a year, pretty consistent, the amount of compost that's being moved daily, why are there spikes? I mean, we need to look between the lines. That's something that's going on within the industry, or maybe we're not looking on the right side of the street. Maybe it is from spent compost, which, I mean, we're nested here between both.
Right. So I think where you're going to get the ambient air monitoring is that it is ambient air and there are going to be variations and it's supposed to be representative. Yes, there are going to be areas that will be higher, there will be areas that will be lower. I think where you get the most bang for your buck at this point is on-site monitoring conducted by the facilities, and therefore if you mitigate the odor on-site, you mitigate the odor in the community.
Okay, yes, and I'm very, very grateful that we're all here and that I think we have everyone's attention from the state side. Thank you, thank you. And going forward, how do we start to implement best management practices? I guess that's a question for ag. And then who is the oversight or the authority for best management practices? Because unfortunately, because of the acre law, the township only gets to hear its residents bring complaints to us. We have no jurisdiction, no authority because of the Right to Farm Act.
Yeah.
So my hands are tied.
So for us, I think it's really important to clearly define what practices are most effective, number one, and then how can we get the financial and technical assistance to get those practices installed on the farms. I think we have a very strong partnership with USDA and with the County Conservation District. you know, the commission right now is it has a lot of funding and momentum with conservation and with those partnerships. So I feel we can use that to our advantage to make this a priority. You know, and first step would be to identify which practices are most effective and most feasible for the industry too. I mean, some of the strategies that are used in Europe are heavily subsidized. You know, they're extremely expensive. So what is feasible and practical here may not be the same as it is in Europe.
Right, Europe and Canada as well. They have air scrubbers that
Right.
reduce hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and odor.
Yeah, it's fair question, and those strategies need to be considered. You know, I know short term is what we need to address, but longer term for sure, those issues need to be considered.
Yeah, and lastly is just a comment. Without an air quality monitor, if we implement new best management practices, how do we know that they're effective?
This is a comment to the health department. One of your recommendations of staying in the house is not a solution. Because I can wake up in the middle of the night and smell it. I have no screens in my windows. I run the air conditioning constantly in the summer just because of that. Now, that's not a recommendation. Actually, I hate to say this, but it's kind of funny because we can't live outside and we can't live inside. So that's not a solution nor a recommendation. So I just want to let you know that this goes far beyond, well, we have to inhibit our lives to satisfy their needs. I don't think that's quite correct, and it shouldn't be that way. Should all be able to live in comfort. When I bought my house, I bought it for a purpose, to enjoy and live in. My daughter got married, I'd say 10, 12 years ago. My family and friends came down, they couldn't even sit outside. That's not only unacceptable, it's embarrassing. And when you buy homes, you're paying $300,000 or $400,000 or better for them, you darn right think you should have the right of a clean airspace. And we're not adversaries toward anything around here. We're trying to be good neighbors. All we're asking is reciprocation. Try it our way. Come and live in my house. See what it's like in the summer. Not fun. Here's a picture right here of what it. Oh, good. I'd like to show you this picture. Our neighbor. This is a meter box. You'll never see this in any other neighborhood like this. So you're going to tell me about my health when it's doing this to that? I've got other pictures to back that up. When you said it happens during the night, you're darn right. That's 6:15 in the morning. That's the plume of doom of our neighborhood. I can go on and on because this is how they work. 24 hours a day, waking our neighbors. It's also noise pollution. This is what they've done to the transformer boxes in our neighborhood. The satellite dishes at our expense, not theirs, because we don't want to break into their profit line. Something to think about here. Not one of you live in this area in your work. Because if you did, you'd be fighting faster and harder than you want to. Tell you that now.
Quick question. I stepped out, so it may have been mentioned. You mentioned a 98 study. Can you publish those records so we can see what the increase has been the past 25 years? Because I know the facility right down the road has doubled in size in the last few years. So what are they 25 years ago, and what will they be 25 years from now? And what will that, excuse me, will there be a health effect if the numbers double from what they are today? Will there be future health benefit risks if the numbers continue to increase? Like you say, they're safe now. Is there an unsafe limit where my 2-year-old graduates high school, college? Are they still going to be safe here, or is it going to get to a limit where it's no longer safe? Is there a limit that it's no longer safe? Can you publish those records for us?
Yeah,
so we
those-
can see
it's-
what has changed.
Yeah, those records are, I have to verify whether they're out on the website or not, but they've been public records for a while. I know the 98 studies out there. Where on the website is exactly, we'll have to track it down, but I know it's out there.
Okay. Just so we have some kind of comparison to what we had before to what we have today. Thank you.
No, that's a great point. I actually wanted to address that. So the previous report, we actually included a summary of the report and the data as an appendix in the report that's published online. So you'll be able to see some of that as well.
Richard Gaw, Chester County Press. Very nice presentation, and thank you for providing the data. But it's data, my assumption is that everyone in this room already knows that there is a problem. Do any of your agencies provide legal regulatory action over the mushroom industry? In other words, can you enact penalties, fines for poor management practices, poor air quality? Do any of your agencies have that jurisdiction to enact penalties? To, in other words, serve as legal watchdogs? Is this and I think this might be just a simple yes or no answer.
So I think as I mentioned in some of the opening remarks, the Department of Health is a non-regulatory agency, so we do not regulate the industry.
So who is regulating the mushroom industry?
In the State Conservation Commission, we regulate the state's Nutrient Management Act, but this does not fall under the jurisdiction of the State Nutrient Management Act. So we do not regulate this.
So my question again is, with all due respect, who is regulating the mushroom
I'm
industry?
deferring to other agencies. It's not agriculture.
Who is regulating the mushroom industry? I'll ask it one more time. Who is regulating the mushroom industry?
Yeah, so basically, mushroom material in this case is the waste that's generated is an agricultural waste, and that material under waste program regulations, Bureau of Waste Management at DEP is exempt from permitting if it's generated in the course of normal farming operations. So that's, material that's coming in as substrate growing medium for the mushroom material. Now, there is language in our regulations that do state that specifically for mushroom composting waste material, that in order for that to also meet a permitting exemption through our program, it has to comply with best management practices. Those BMPs are contained in the mushroom manual, shorthand name for it.
Sir, with all due respect, my apologies for interrupting you, but with all due respect, may I ask this? If no one's regulating the mushroom industry, why should they even care about best management practices?
Well, I think that in accordance with that manual, the mushroom manual, there are mushroom farm environmental management plans that need to be produced that are reviewed and approved by county conservation districts, as well as submitted to DEP for review and approval. And those are evaluated to ensure that they can also demonstrate that they're complying with the best management practices in the mushroom manual. Now, I think it's worth stating that based upon years of site inspections and evaluation of those plans, that it doesn't appear as though any of the existing operations are violating any of their, the protocols under their environmental management plans or the BMPs in the manual. But I think that sort of relates back to, is the manual adequate for addressing the issues that have been discussed today? And from there, it's a matter of pinpointing what are the sources of the issue in this case. And then, as Doug was stating, going about addressing those sources from there.
I have one last question, and it's really to Doug and really to everyone. To what degree can your agencies assure that you will have the full cooperation of the mushroom industry moving forward? Because Doug, you listed quite a few initiatives that I think are very, very positive and positive to the ears of the people who are suffering behind me, that something is on the docket to improve the situation, technology, et cetera. But in order for this to work, you're going to need the cooperation of the industry. And if they don't have anyone regulating them, why should they care? Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, this issue is given to us and evolving, as we're talking about it in real time. These are things we're researching, engaging with the industry on, looking for those technologies for an answer. So, I wish I had a very firm answer for you, other than that we will continue to work very closely with the industry, with our other agencies here, to do what is most reasonable and helps address the issue related to public health is absolutely priority for us and a concern for us.
Last question. Is anyone here from the mushroom industry? Please raise your hand. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Thanks.
You said there's no violations and regulations. Well, I called the DEP about a week and a half ago, spoke with Lisa. And I told her about the sprinkler systems operating across Star Road. And in their own words, they are not to be running those in winter months. They say it themselves, the mushroom industry, because of the depth of the frozen ground. Yet they were running. When she called me back, so I was made aware of that by someone else, but it is warm out today. Well, the frost line doesn't know warmth on the above air temperature. It takes time for that frost line to defrost. They are not to be running them, but they were. That's a violation. Am I correct?
Just so you know, I'm the regional waste manager, as Pat pointed out earlier. And the inspector did go out and inspect your complaint. And they did run them, but the runoff that was coming off the field that you saw was not what they were spraying. It was just,
Doesn't matter.
it was water.
They're not to be
from-
running it. You're trying to sidestep the question here. Are they to be running it or not in winter months? It says in their own rules, no. And she said it was a warm day. Well, I got news for her. And I pull my calendar. I know when spring starts, when summer starts, and when fall starts to winter. It's a seasonal pattern. You just don't dictate, oh, it's 75 degrees out there. I think I'll run those sprinklers. There were mud puddles all over. I walked that place. I saw it. I finally had to get out of there because my feet were getting wet. That's okay. If that's the way you want to justify, it's not okay with me. And as far as putting that monitor next to this building, no one ever came to us at Landenberg Hunt and asked if you could put it on our property at the lowest point, which is by our pond, and we have electricity there, and it would be in safekeeping. But you didn't ask. You put it in the worst place ever. Your figures really, to me, are so skewed, I wouldn't even look at them. I've talked to a couple of your individuals that took the readings off of them. When Pennsylvania could take my license plates off my car going through the turnpike, and you got a monstrosity of a system there, when I've seen them as size of a carry-on luggage, that'll do more than that monitor you people put there. It's embarrassing. You're still working in the 18th century, maybe at 19th, I don't know. But it's to a point now, I'm standing here thinking, I'm living in the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania used to be the toughest state on everything at one time. I grew up in Ohio. We used to say, you don't want to go to Pennsylvania. You'll never get away with it there. Now I think you can get away with anything here. In fact, as I said to the supervisors one night, if you title everything with agriculture and they're allowed to do this, if I ever murdered somebody, I'd say it was an agricultural murder because you can get away with murder. Just use agriculture. And it's time to wake up because this is a serious issue. Your plan sounds good, but that's a plan. And I know how plans work in politics. Another question is, how many of you politicians take money for your political campaign from mushroom farmers? Zero. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Senator Kane, because I'm sure others are taking, and really, when you do that, you're at their mercy. That's why I think there should be campaign reform. No politicians take money from anybody because now you owe someone. Not the residents, but the people who gave you the money. Thank you.
Hello. Madeline Diker. I'm new here to New Garden. We moved here about 1.5 years ago. When we were looking for homes, we looked in one particular area. I live in Hartfeld National Golf Course Community. And when we were looking at houses, In another area, I go, oh my God, we can't buy a house here. You know, it really smells bad. You know, I was looking for the sewer. I was looking for what's causing that smell. We're from Connecticut, you know. And we finally found a house in Hartfeld. Obviously, it didn't smell on those days. And I bought the house. And then lo and behold, you know, it smells just like the neighborhood where I didn't want to move to. But my question is, a couple of questions, I guess. When you measure the levels of the hydrogen sulfide at those locations, would I be correct in assuming that the hydrogen sulfide levels would be higher at the facilities since it's further away from, you know, the monitors are further away? So the mushroom, or the facilities of the mushroom would have higher hydrogen sulfide concentrations. And then I'm just thinking, and I know nobody here is from OSHA, but what about the employees that work at these facilities? If I'm, you know, working there and there's, you know, you need a paycheck, you're not going to complain to OSHA that, you know, your boss might not be watching the monitors. Who's watching out for the employees? Well, that's my question. That's just something to think about, and I don't know who would answer that, but just something to think about. Thank you for your presentation and coming out tonight.
Yeah, I can't speak to the worker safety piece. In theory, the levels would be higher, closer to the source. Whatever that source ends up being, and again, that's the challenge with ambient air monitoring. We can identify a pollutant in the air and give you a wind direction if we have the meteorological equipment. We can't tell you exactly what's coming. So in theory, those levels would be higher, closer to the source. Yes.
So I would be concerned for the employees. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joellen Reindl. I live in Landenberg Hunt. A thought, one, what she just said, those monitors need to be right on top of those places because that's going to give you your answers, truly. My question, I've been here for 20-something years, 23 years. And over time, there's been certain smells, really deep smells to the point where you cannot, I couldn't stand at the bus stop with my kids, couldn't take a breath. Then big smoke things coming down my street in the middle of the night. I can see the white smoke in the middle of the night. I call the police because I'm thinking there's a fire or something. When I get a response from the police, and God bless the police, I am a complete supporter of the police. But for them to give me a response of, it's the mushroom farm, they're doing this, they just pay the fines, they're good. They have the money to pay the fines, and it's all, you know, they're just gonna keep doing it, they're just gonna keep paying the fines. Something has to change, because I hate to say it, this is on you guys. We need your help. Your presentation was beautiful, very well put, very well presented. And I don't want to insult you, but I felt like I was just, there's a little smoke coming my way. I don't need that. I don't need that. I've had enough smoke for the last 20-something years. Something needs to be done. You got families, you got kids, you got grandkids, you got us that we don't even know what possibly is ahead for us because of this. Lots of money we've spent. Lots of money replacing over and over. We're not rich. We live in a moderate neighborhood. Help us. That's why you're here. That's why we pay you. That's where our money, our tax dollars are going. Do something, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Donna Carroll. I also live right here in Landenberg Hunt, number 19 Pelham Drive. We have 2 acres and the end of our property backs up very exactly to the end of Laurel Valley Farms. So the back of our yard looks out on their property. We've been here 33 years and we bought because this is a gorgeous area. The homes were lovely. The schools were good. There was an odor, but we were willing to accept it because we thought it's an odor. We can deal with it. And it wasn't all the time. But in the last 10 years, it's gotten worse. And we've noticed that we've been replacing our air conditioners. I have sterling silver that's been given to us by family members that is black. I scrub it, I clean it with silver polish, I put it in a Ziploc bag, I put it in my china cabinet that has a protective thing. Within a week, it's black. All my sterling silver jewelry is ruined. I can't have it anymore in a jewelry box. And I had no idea where this was coming from. And I agree with some of my neighbors. Our house smells inside and out, and we run our air conditioners constantly. But the main question why I'm standing here is, has anybody else reported health issues other than asthma that you know of? I'm in the process of being evaluated and treated for a number of lung nodules that are not cancerous, but were discovered in the course of another treatment. And I have to go back every 6 months and have new CAT scans done. And I'm going to be seeing a pulmonologist. They haven't caused me physical problems yet, but if I find that that they could be due or possibly due to exposure to hydrogen sulfide, I'm a walker in the neighborhood. I'm a big gardener. I'm outside with my kids, and now I'm outside with my grandkids. I love the park. I love coming up here and walking. But if I discover that, what would you advise me to do if it's possible that those nodules that I get them, some of them resolve, I grow new ones, and for that reason, I'm being followed every 6 months. What would you advise me to do?
So lung nodules were one of the complaints that we had received, and we did include and address that in our report. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of data. You know, it's never comforting to
So
hear,
you
but
have had lung nodules reported?
we have had lung nodules reported as an environmental health complaint, yes. And we did address it in the full report. However, there's not a lot of research related to lung nodules and hydrogen sulfide, so we couldn't come to any conclusions based on that. But as you have noted, absolutely follow up with your healthcare practitioner. Those are definitely things that we would
But
recommend.
if there's a causal effect of being exposed to hydrogen sulfide and growing lung nodules that are not, the doctors can't explain it, they don't understand it. And now I'm going to bring them some new information about the data that's been collected. What recourse do I have as an individual to say, I think the air quality caused this? My sister is here and she's supporting me. She just happens to be in town and she's a nurse and she has been concerned.
Is also clinical research for many, many years. And my concern here is, I'm getting to the health part of this. You did a great job, but at some level, it's kind of like, I hate to go back to COVID, but one of the things I recognized with COVID was, you know, after people took an injection took the vaccine, there wasn't a good way that we had set up to follow up on the side effects of what people might be experiencing. I happened to get the J&J because that's what I wanted to take. And every couple of days, I got a text, what's going on? Do you have any side effects? But all the people that I spoke with, nobody ever reached out. And so they were never, we're not going to know. What I'm trying to get to is, unless there's some way of having a study to invite people who live in this area who are exposed to these high levels to report any and every side effect that may be, related, and have somebody who's willing, a researcher, to sift through it and determine whether or not it's possible that these high levels of hydrogen sulfate are causing her nodules, somebody's other respiratory problems, and you named a lot of other potential health issues. So if we don't have anything in place to collect that data, all of the people that live here and have lived here a long time and are experiencing health issues, everybody's just going to say, oh, well, I guess she doesn't have respiratory issues to start with. She isn't a history of asthma. She doesn't have any of that. So, what can be done to maybe draw in another agency to reach out to the community and actually collect that data? So we can start to see whether or not there really is something going on here on a much grander scope.
To piggyback on the person that spoke before me, we need your help. Thank you.
Didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Somebody bail me out. Put this guy. Thank you.
Help is on the way. You're good. There's always one.
Thank you,
There you
sir.
go.
Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for your presentation. Sure to appreciate it. Jerry Hauk is my name. I lived here for 30 years. Few air conditioners in, a lot of jewelry. My wife's not here, but a lot of dark black jewelry in plastic bags. But anyway, a couple of things. I really want to kind of ask a general question of the representation too. But I want to piggyback off of your fine presentation. So we're getting some data, and you're kind of saying, yeah, there's possibly some allergies, some asthma things here going on. And that's based on that box that was out here for a very long time. And I've got issues about the amount of time it took us to get any data on that, but that's a question for another day. But we now have, we've now got measurement tools implanted adjacent to the operation. And I'm appreciative that you're saying, yeah, we want to look at that. We really want to look at that. So, so I'm thinking that if you're giving me this now, eventually you're going to see data that's probably going to take that a step higher, more elevated, more concerning, whatever you want to call it. So this is leading up to my question. And it comes down to Article 1, Section 22 of our Pennsylvania Constitution. Who arbitrates my right to clean air versus all of their rights in the right to farm? Who's arbitrating that? Is it their exemptions that are more valuable than my right to, all of our right to clean air? Who's arbitrating that is my question. And if you can answer it, go ahead. But it's been asked for 30 years, and I can tell you what, I ain't getting an answer from anybody. But somebody's got to arbitrate that. Somebody's got to say, well, wait a minute, that clean air in the Constitution that we serve and swear to, okay, that clean air, who does the exemption stand better than the clean air? We're going to be at that place. By your report, we're already kind of there. Yeah, you might have an asthma and you have a cough, and it's, you'll get over it. We know that there's measuring tools now that are adjacent there that they're going to take that to the next level. So that's where my question is to the group, if you guys can answer. But who arbitrates what that Constitution says? And I'd love to get an answer from representation.
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it's the Attorney General's office. So their findings and any findings that come after this could potentially be investigated by the Attorney General's office, or the Auditor General could also do an audit of the situation. I don't know if, John, if you have anything else.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Senator John Kane. First of all, thank you for coming out and answering some of the questions of people that have some concerns here. As you may hear my voice a little bit, I'm a little congested. The reason being is because I'm a cancer survivor. I had cancer up in the nasal pharynx because of something, who knows? I do know that happened 9 years ago. I was a plumber by trade. I don't know. One of the things I want to say is I want to thank the individuals that are here from the mushroom, because you didn't have to be here. and you're here and you know you're gonna get, you're gonna hear a lot of angry people, as you should be. My commitment only to you, and that's all I have, is I'm a man of my word, is that we will get to the bottom of this. We'll partnership with our friends that are here from the mushroom factories and see what we can do to get this resolved. My wife and I, in 2002, purchased a property over in West Grove. Unfortunately, we didn't buy it because when I had gone out there, I smelled that smell that you're talking about. And there was no way I could live with that. But I am a neighbor. I live in Birmingham, which isn't that far from here. I understand your anger. I understand the questions that you're asking about who's overseeing the mushroom companies. All great questions. These are things that we're hearing, and I assure you, I will bring back to Harrisburg and try to get as many answers as I possibly can. But I honestly believe that we need the partnership with the mushroom factories. We can't allow them to continue to do this. And the person that ended up asking the question, God bless you for asking about the workers there, because I can only imagine what they're going through. And I come from the House of Labor. I ran a union, and I care to what our working class people. So thank you so much for that. I don't have all the answers. I'm newly elected. I'm up for election again this year, but I have never received a dime, and I can assure you, from the mushroom companies. Thank you.
Before we take the next question, if I could just address a couple of the questions that have come up. First off, I just want to address some of the health effects. I think as Julie had mentioned, we did discuss some of those in the actual report that is posted online. I think one of the things that our team can actually do is actually go back and look at some of the scientific literature that is available that discusses some of the health effects and potentially provide a summary of some of the findings that are already in literature that exist. And we can perhaps make them available so that you can take a look through those, and then we can take a further in-depth look at some of the literature that exists within the health studies. I also just want to address some of the questions about the Westchester study that the gentleman up here had asked. We are aware, we've been talking to the professor who's overseeing some of that collection, and I think we will absolutely review that data. I think it's important to understand, though, that there are different types of collectors that are used. The types that DEP uses may be different than what's being placed, and we don't know all of those details. So we, again, will commit to absolutely reviewing that information. We just know that, there's some different methods that are used, and so one method that's used here may not be exactly the method that's used there. And so it may be difficult for us to make those one-for-one comparisons, but again, we'll know more once we're able to actually review what those methods are and what the data looks like.
At the floor. Hi, my name is Jerry Arnett. I've been a resident of New Garden Township in Landenberg Hunt for 33 years now. We built our home over here. The first 15 years or so that we lived here, we knew what we were getting into with the mushroom country, the odor. That's not the issue. Things have changed over the years, of course, as many people have conveyed. And my question is, with the monitoring that was done up here by the township building, we do have, I get what I understand, monitoring studies being done by Westchester that's more inclusive or broader than that. When will we, the public, have access to that information? We want to, we see the results. We receive the results of this monitoring system, but I can tell you that living in the neighborhood, I live in the bottom of the hill, further away from, I face the township building or back up against the township building. We don't have experienced as much problems as the people in the back of the neighborhood. It's bad where we are, but it's even worse up there. So the monitoring here at the top of the hill is much different than at the bottom of the hill or people that live closer to that, as people have expressed. So when are we going to have access to that?
I can actually speak to that. So Christopher Himes, New Garden Township Manager. So the Westchester scope of work is essentially existing in a completely separate parallel than this ongoing study with DEP, DOH, and agriculture. That is one where the township updated its renewed agreement to continue measurements into 2024. That's likely to be a summary level report that's going to be provided this fiscal year, which of course we're a calendar-based fiscal year. And the performance agreement is as soon as, his name is Professor Lorenzo Chena from the Department of Environmental Health at Westchester. He's performing kind of the senior project manager for the study. As soon as they see a sufficient sample size that they can provide a summary level report to analyze, they have a 90-day window to provide that performance agreement, to provide that summary report to the township. We will share that data, of course, with all of the department agencies today, but we're also going to make sure that there is a meeting similar to this tonight where he's providing the stage and providing his findings of fact for the township. So that's our ability to influence at least that outcome of work. So if you're asking, stay tuned, but it's dependent upon when they let us know that they're ready to deliver that report.
Okay, so thank you, Chris.
Yep.
What I understand is you're saying the calendar year follows, the fiscal year follows the calendar year.
We're
so
January to December.
31st,
Yep. So we're
2024. So 90 days after that time frame at the latest, we should expect something.
we'll continue to provide updates.
At the worst case, a year from now, approximately.
Yes, yeah, we'll continue to provide as many updates during our public meetings as possible. I have continuous conversations with Professor Chena. We have a dedicated, I'll call it like a focus of staff and of support volunteers kind of working with him to kind of understand how far along they are, but it's dependent upon them basically completing their own monitoring and delivering that summary report. So
We appreciate that, Chris, very much, because we've been involved in this with Christina Sappi since 2019. The problem is prevailing much prior to that time frame.
correct.
And we're, time's flowing by. We'd want something done. As you can see, we need help now, not 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
The township, and just to provide kind of an amplifying, so the township now has the finalized documents that were provided us today by the Pennsylvania Department of Health. So we're going to continue to kind of aggregate and collect information as it comes on the township website. We'll make sure that that is heavily communicated to our residents, that this is where you go as a kind of a living document that we're going to update with more and more information. And then, of course, tonight's meeting is, it's being broadcast live on YouTube. We have over 100 people viewing right now, and it's being recorded, and we'll keep the link on here as well. So you'll make sure that this discussion is kind of kept on the record as well. So as transparent as possible from the township's perspective.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Appreciate the presentation tonight too, folks. But we need action, not more words. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Steinling. I'm a resident of Landenberg Hunt. As you've heard a lot of my neighbors touch on and the pictures that Ron brought, we know that the Department of Health can't comment on it, but is there any studies or anyone being teed up to look into the deterioration of metal on our houses, on our cars, inside our homes, our HVACs? We brought this up as a health concern because if that's what it does to metal, what is it doing inside our bodies? One thing that I don't think anyone's mentioned here is that we are blacklisted by different companies who will not come out and service, install, honor warranties for things that we need on our homes. Who can help us do a study on the effects? What department is that? Who do we follow up with? No one can answer me here? Not even a referral of someone I could go to and ask? I know that it's not everyone and you guys can't provide those answers, but who can we follow up on? How can we continue to live here? How can we sell our homes? If that was the easy answer. No one?
I don't want you to walk away and not hear anything, but if the state study indicated that hydrogen sulfide was not corrosive, and that was the only thing that we collected in data on, is that correct? Okay, and is the Westchester study collecting data on any other gases besides hydrogen sulfide?
Yeah.
Okay, so hydrogen, sulfide, ammonia, and weather conditions. Okay. All right. I think she left. Oh, there you are. Okay. And methane. So that could be important information for the Department of Health to be looking at. So as soon as we get that information, I know none of this is fast enough. I understand. I really do. But as soon as they get that information, that may inform them on what's going on with the metal and might be able to give you some more stuff. So come over here.
Hi, my name's Susan Rawheiser. I'm at 31 Pelham Drive in our lovely neighborhood of Landenberg Hunt. I would like to reiterate that if I'm not mistaken from the slides, the Department of Health wants nothing to do in stating that hydrogen sulfide is corrosive. Am I correct?
We're just not the appropriate entity to make a conclusion on that.
So then again, who is? Okay, I'm all for health. I'm not the healthiest person around. But I have invested over $15,000 7 times for a new HVAC system. 7 times. Okay? How long has your HVAC system stood? Okay. Longest one I've ever had is 7 years. Lived here 31 years. Okay? I'm mad. I'm really bad. And we got to get something done. Can I take a collection from you the next time I need a HVAC? No. I got to go to the bank. They know me my name. What do you need now, Sue? Okay. Here you go. Thanks, I think, for nothing.
So let me just address, I completely understand your frustration. I would be, if I was in your position, I would be very frustrated as well. Unfortunately, we in the Department of Health are not necessarily able to make an association on a non-health impact exposure. It's just not something that is in our purview in our bailiwick. We understand the concern and frustration that you're having. I really do. I can understand why that's very frustrating. I think what we need to understand is perhaps it is maybe an academic partner. I don't know if we can potentially look towards those academic partners and see if someone's willing to take on a study and look at that, but it's not something that we're looking at health impacts. We're looking at human health impacts. And so some of these other elements that are outside of that particular impact is not something that we are equipped in our agency to necessarily study. So there may be some academic partners that might be able to look into this particular issue. And I think we'll have to just maybe take that back, see if there's some conversations we can have as an all of government and see if there's someone that can assist, but it's just not something that the Department of Health has in their purview.
State of Pennsylvania had someone similar to the Surgeon General, a doctor, a physician that heads up Pennsylvania Health. Are we just talking to you? I mean, are there people over here that actually study biological situations?
But you're not asking for a biological situation. I guess that's what I'm trying to convey. You're asking about how a particular chemical is impacting a metal. So what we're
that understands health and stuff and relates it like that, Mrs. Caroline. Maybe
a lot of
your
other departments sitting up there who are being really quiet.
Maybe your department along with a doctor or physician could do research studies with this. You're sitting here
So
giving
we're-
generic answers to a really difficult question, I understand. But those answers are empty. Fit your house.
Again, I understand your frustration, sir.
Job application, I want mandates. That's what I'm looking for.
So, sir, I'm just trying to explain to you that it's not a physician issue. We have lots of physicians that work in our department, and we are assessing the impact on human health. The question that I hear from the woman who's speaking here is asking about the impact on non-human health things, metal, corrosion. I'm hearing that concern. It's just not something that we in the Department of Health oversee. And it's not something that we're equipped to do research studies on. We don't do research in our department in the way that you might think. So as I said,
So you have any comments about this, or do you have any?
No, it's, yeah. I wrote the question down and we're going to go back and we're going to, maybe do a little research. It's not something that is in the department's purview to have that. We have an organization that's full of, biologists, soil scientists, and, well, right, maybe in our drinking water program, but, that's not an area of expertise for our department. It's not an area that we regulate. So we don't have that. I can't tell you. I just can't tell you. We don't have that level of expertise to give you anything definitive on that. But, just to try to be helpful, I wrote it down. We'll go back. I don't think there's a state agency. I think that our friends from health have laid it out. You're probably looking at more of an academic research issue there. It's sort of, yeah. We're the Department of Environmental Protection. You mean the federal EPA or?
Whatever.
Yeah.
you're
What
at.
the- well, I'm pretty sure. I think somebody would have spoke up if it was under our purview. We have our program folks here and it's not.
Chemical release, it wouldn't be an environmental issue?
Chemical. I understand that there's a problem. Yes, I'm just saying we got to work within the limitations of our regulatory authority.
It's just making everybody else more angry. Your answer right there of I'm not really sure is
Yeah.
actually a better answer.
Well,
And
that's,
you say, I might take this back to somebody, but I
Thank
ask each one of you, please come park your car in our neighborhood. And let me know how you feel about your car being parked in our neighborhood. And see what happens. Bring your jewelry while you're there. And you, I'm sure, have kids because you're younger. And you guys all probably have kids. You literally just told us, please don't let your kids come outside I can't let them play on Fridays. I can't let them play on Wednesdays. Forget in the morning. Like, that's ridiculous. That is an absurd suggestion. And I'm actually totally offended by it. I've been sitting here very quiet. And I cannot believe that this is the reaction. As a person that has support and a job in leadership, this is embarrassing for me. And I'm looking and listening to people, and I appreciate that you guys at least have the gumption to say something from your department and say that we're not in charge of that, but we're asking for answers. And at least saying we don't know is a hell of a lot better than just sitting. Well, we will work on it. We hear your frustration. We're gonna go back. We're tired of waiting. It's ridiculous. And I know I jumped out and turned, and I'm sorry. I'm not a jump out and turn person, but I can't stand here any longer and listen to this. It's ridiculous. I'm like totally blown away. So I asked everybody in this room. I moved here, didn't have asthma. 4 people in my family, 3 of us do. So there's the suffering concern that is now developed. Who has asthma in here? I'm sure I'm not the only one. Who's replaced your air conditioning unit? Who had to replace your cars, tires 4 times, 7 years? Ridiculous. And then your answer is, I don't know who's been responsible for it. It's just frustrating. So I'm sorry I jumped on. I apologize for that. But this is ridiculous.
But they've been waiting.
I know.
Let them go.
I already forgot what I was gonna say.
Can I? Can I just address really quickly
Oh, then I'm
one of
gonna
our
put it
comments
for
now
real.
about having young children? I have a 4-year-old. I also live in the western side of the state in an area called the Mon Valley. Not sure if you're familiar, but so it's right near Clairton Coke Works. And so the smells you have are very similar to ones I experience every day, in addition to, many other chemicals. They're things that, again, you feel powerless, right? There's nothing within your control. This is some type of exposure that you have. I like to run. I like to play outside with my kid. I like to go running with my daughter. And so it bothers me that I have to look on my county's health department for the real-time data of what's the particular matter at this time. Is it healthy for me to be outside? My husband, we didn't live in the area for a long time, but now my husband has asthma. So these are all things that are familiar and shared, and I understand and concern your frustration, and I really appreciate you voicing that today.
How can I? Not yet.
I did replace my air conditioner about 3 years ago, but yeah.
Is it because I'm Mexican?
But I've only lived in my house for
Okay.
8 years, so.
So I just want to say that we don't have anything against the mushroom companies, okay? We love mushrooms, right? Yeah, we love mushrooms. And what I'm hearing is that you cannot help us, but we need help. So perhaps hey, join a partnership between your agencies and the mushroom industry. Perhaps we can find a common, solution to it instead of fighting. So what do you say? Yeah? Come on, man.
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
All right,
That-
yeah.
That is exactly why we're here. We're all committed to working together to help. It's going to take everybody.
Hi, my name is Christina Molinar. I actually work here at New Garden Township. I live about 20 minutes west of here in New London Township. This is geared towards Department of Health. Sorry, you guys have been getting nailed. But I have no respiratory issues or no history of respiratory issues, no asthma, no allergies, until I started working here about 2.5 years ago. Basically, the minute I cross over into New Garden Township and until I leave in the afternoon, I am blowing my nose. I am sneezing. I am just constantly irritated. I have gone to the doctor. There is nothing that's showing up on tests. There's no allergies being shown. So my concern here is when you say that exposure to the chemicals, yes, you can have coughs, you can have fatigue, you can have, this or that or the other, but it's fine long-term. This is inflammation in my body. And if this is happening day after week, after month, after year, I think it's dangerous to say that there's no long-term effects. Whether or not studies are showing anything at this point, I just don't think that's responsible information to put out into the public.
So, so thank you, and I appreciate you, again, sympathize with, what you're going through. And I think what you have to understand a little bit is that when we do analysis and we look at scientific data, we're looking at just that. We're looking at other studies that have been done and how we're basing some of those, the information that we're putting out in our reports. And so we look at what, as Julie had talked about, acute and moderate and chronic and longer term exposures. And so when we're basing some of these recommendations, it's based on those studies. And you can imagine that a study that's done that we're using as kind of the baselines are population based. And so, they're generalities. It doesn't mean that it's your experience is not the same as what's of that much more general population. We're just saying that in general, as we look at those studies, that's the general recommendation or general things that we're seeing in the studies that have been conducted. So I think, we can't get into a lot of those details as we go through a very quick presentation. Some of those additional details are contained in the actual report, and that as the Chris Himes has said it's posted on the website, so maybe take a look a little bit closer at that. And as I said, we can maybe delve a little bit deeper in some of the actual health studies that we've used in our report or other studies that are available and try to do some more additional assessments that we can and put out with like a literature review or a summary of some of the additional data that's available.
I just have one quick question. I know in the refining business that if you live within a certain distance and you smell an obnoxious smell at night, you have a number to call to say, hey, somebody's got to come out here and look at this. Where's our number? When I get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, have a terrible headache. You know, where's my number to call and say, hey, come on out here and smell this? Do you have one? No? With the refinery, I believe you call the EPA.
Yeah. No, we do.
You call here.
We have a 24-hour number that anyone can call with complaints about any kind of environmental
Where is it?
emergency. It's on our website, but I can give it to you if you'd like. It's
Okay.
800-541-2050. 800-541-2050.
Okay,
And that's a 24-hour number.
thank you.
Just to speak to that, I think it'd be helpful for everyone to provide their resources at their agencies, and we can provide that as a collection point, so everybody knows in this township that they can always go to our website as a central resource for everything. So we'll make sure that we get that posted as soon as possible, and feel free to call it whenever you do have an issue, ma'am.
And I'll just mention from the Department of Health on the fact sheet that's in the hallway on the back side in the bottom corner, there is our form for contact us, as well as our contact information is available on that, which is also now publicly available on our website as well as the township's website.
Good evening. My name is Clariello, and I live in Harlow Point in Landenberg. I noticed that the information, the stats, was over a year old. I think it was as of December 2022. I think it's interesting that we are in the beginning of 2024, so where has the last 15 months have gone? Number one. Number two, how many years of data on this subject has been collected so far? Does anybody know?
So I think in the report, it's roughly about 18 months worth of data.
No, I know worth of data, but how many years has the smells and the air quality, how long have you been investigating where this is coming from? Is it 10 years, 15 years, 20, a year? How long what the data gathering, how many years has the data gathering been going on? I'm asking it for a specific reason. I think you can probably guess my next question.
Right. So we installed the sensors in the last couple of years. It was a 2-year commitment to a project to collect data. We've since finished collecting that data, and that's what's included in the report.
So there's nothing that was collected in the late 90s, early 2000s?
So
This has
again,
just come up?
we had hydrogen sulfide is not a pollutant that we regularly sample for. It's not a generally, there are multiple pollutants we sample for statewide. We run roughly 70 air monitoring sites throughout the state. The New Garden Airport site is one of the ones that we run on a regular basis. We look for multiple pollutants, ozone, fine particulate. The federal criteria pollutants, of which there are 7, and we look for across the state. The city of Philadelphia, Allegheny County do their own air monitoring, so ballpark-ish about 90 continuous air monitoring sites across the Commonwealth. The H2 hydrogen sulfide is not a criteria pollutant. It's not a federally regulated pollutant. So it's a very the sources of the emission are relatively limited, so we don't look for it on a regular basis.
I guess my question is, how many years of data do we need before any action is taken? I mean, it's a little frustrating that we've all been smelling stuff. I actually just moved into the area 5 years ago. I used to live 2 miles over the border in Delaware, and I could smell it there. So to me, moving from where I was in Delaware to here made no difference, because it's not only the state of Pennsylvania. Trust me, it's northern Delaware has the same issue. So I guess my concern is that, it's like spaghetti on a plate. We got it, we know there's a problem, and all we're doing is moving it around, but no one's taking the spaghetti off the plate, and no one's changing what it looks like either. And it's very frustrating, as you can all tell. The other thing is that once you do collect, and I don't even know what data you're aiming for, then what are you gonna do with it? Who do you go to? Mr. Go-Ahead asked a question earlier tonight. It's like, where does it go? Who has control over the mushroom companies? Like, okay, we get all this great data, and then what? What's the question? don't know.
If I could just speak to that on the agriculture side, I think we can use whatever data we can to help inform decisions on what type of practices we can employ to mitigate it. I think that's critical to use that data.
And I get that, but with
Yeah.
all due respect, we all know,
Yeah.
well, we think we know where the source is, but yet we don't know who's controlling that source in order to mandate. Somebody else used the word mandate, but if you can't mandate something, guess what? Nothing's going to get done.
Yeah,
So that's a big, that would be a big concern.
Stephen?
The other is, the Department of Health.
Oh, sorry, before we get any further, can I address that? So about timeline, I'm actually one of the people that Representative Sappy first spoke to about this in 2020. She came and said, hey, I have this municipality, we have this concern, what can we do? And I gotta tell you, she was very, active about this. Didn't just talk to me, talked to the folks at DEP, the folks at Health, just said, listen, we have this problem. We gotta look into this. We gotta know what's going on. And that's what led to the study. It took some time to figure it out because as DEP said, this is not something that, we look into. There was the study in 98. Looked at that. It's like, okay, we need to, check into this.
Years ago.
Yes. So it's like, okay, we need a new study. We had to figure this out. It was, as they said, they hit the ground fast. That's why they, they're like, well, we're going to go with the machines we have, went through, and about the whole timeline, the data was collected. I understand that the data was released soon afterwards. And then it's like, okay, we have to go to the conclusions. And, this is also, so this was scheduled today. First time that I saw this report was today. This was pulled together. We are trying to get this out as quickly as possible. And yes, it took time. And I'm sorry about the amount of time that it took, but it took time and we're trying to get it out as quickly as possible. But we did see some of the data. We needed to get the conclusions, saw the data. Doug and his team went to work, got the $1.5 million so that way we can do more studies because there are questions that people here in the audience are asking that we don't have the answers to, and we need more information, and we know we need more information because we have to get the answers to this, and we have to figure out how to fix it. And there are some of the local mushroom farmers here, because this is not just some nameless business that's a million miles away. It's the neighbors, it's people in the, people here. And when people say, well, how are we going to make the mushroom industry want to do it? They want to do it. They need to know how. We have to tell them how. We need more data. We need to keep working on this. And I wish that we knew everything.
No, and I get that, but how many years of data and data and data? And we sit here and we learn something from you with every presentation that you make, but it's not helping us to live a better life. It's information that probably just, gets us more upset because nothing's being done about it. I'm not saying that that's your fault. I'm saying, whose fault is it that when you collect the data and nothing gets done? Who do you report to? Does the Department of Health report to the governor? And if it's the governor, I could tell you right now, he's not being very representative for us when it comes to, Act 12, which is a whole other issue. But I'm just saying, if that's who you report to, I got grave concerns about that as well. So this is what I'm saying. All the data is great. It's very informative. Yes, it makes us all upset, etc. But at the end of the day, if you can do something constructive, not all at once, it doesn't have to be, but maybe baby steps, that would be great. The other thing which bothered me, and it might just be words or the way the slide was put together, but it says that PADOH intends to participate in meetings with stakeholders to discuss outdoor H2S levels and concerns in this area. Stakeholders, who are you talking about? Us?
So let me just address a couple of your concerns if I can. So first off, you initially started the question with, why is the data cut off at 2022? And I think, we need an amount of data in order for us to conduct analysis and do some of the information that we're showing. So trend data, looking at different times, looking at different seasons. It takes a long period of time to have that data. There was actually data collected beyond that time period, and we stopped our collection at 2022 because we felt we had enough data as collection was continuing. We did actually look at the data beyond 2022. We didn't see any additional trends that data would contribute. We wanted to actually start the analysis before that point, and that's exactly what we did. I think it's, while I understand the frustration here, it does take us a long time to do this analysis. We work with our federal partners at ATSDR, as I mentioned when I open that up. We look towards some of their subject matter experts that are at ATSDR to help make sure that the analysis and the methods and what we're actually producing is accurate. I think that's what everybody would want. They don't want us making mistakes and double checking. And so we ask these experts to look at that. And then there's processes for us to also go through as a government agency to get reports and products out the door. And so that does take time. It's just part of the process. And we know that time is not something that everybody wants us to work faster, and we would if that was humanly possible. But we do try to get things out the door as fast as we possibly
I
can.
understand things take time, but I also understand deadlines. I worked for large corporations for 40 years. I just didn't say, oh, I'm going to collect this data and then tell my boss, oh, well, I need time.
Again, I understand your frustration, but there's also, again, I completely understand your frustration, but this is also, we have a small team, and this isn't the only other project that we're working on. There's other community concerns equal to yours that we need to focus on. And so again, we try our best to get data produced as quickly as we possibly can.
It's manpower. I get that. I could understand that, but I'd like to move on with.
And I just want to address, can I just address your other question, ma'am, if that's okay? You had asked about the comments on the slide. And, so I think from at least the Department of Health, we have been here. We've been talking with the township officials throughout this process. We continue to engage in with the community. We're envisioning this as the beginning and not the end. I think that the comment on that slide was simply trying to talk about that, we're here with our other government agencies, our other sister agencies. We'll continue to partner with them. We'll continue to partner with the community and try to work, with our partners to try to help inform the solution that ultimately might be there. So if there's additional data that we can review, additional information that comes in that we can participate in, the department is committed to try to looking at those elements. And so that was the intention of what that bullet on that slide was trying to convey.
Oh, and I get it. I think I understand, but I'd like to know who your stakeholders are. Is it us? Is that who you're
Well, I think it's the community. I think it's our sister agency. I think it's, potentially the industry if they're part of the solution. I think it's whoever comes to the table that we need to bring in to be able to help assist in a solution.
And the other question I had was, you may consider a review of additional H2S data for this area. So that implies that you may consider, does that mean you don't have enough yet?
So I think this sort of harkens back to some of the questions that were proposed about the Westchester data. We know that there's other data that has been collected in this area. We know that there may be other monitors that DEP may think about considering installing. And so we just want to leave the door open, again, the beginning, not the end, that if there is additional additional available information. We don't want to just say we've written this report and we're walking out the door. That's not the intention. If there's other data available that we can review, take a look at that data, provide commentary, we're happy to do that. So that was, again, the intention of that statement, if that's helpful to address that concern.
And just to your point on the agriculture side, again, I mean, we have the data, there's data floating around. I think we agriculture and our other agencies need to engage with the industry and form a strategy on how we'll help address this issue in the short term, long term range. Really, I think that's critical and something that I think we could commit to doing in the State Conservation Commission, at least bringing those people together.
Okay, well, definitely appreciate that. I would also appreciate a deadline as to
Yeah.
when you have this data, I mean, years from now, when you have this data, what's your next concrete step of who can actually help? So this way we can put things and actions into place that the industries, yourselves and us could take besides keeping our kids, shielded from the bus stop at 7 o'clock in the morning.
You are absolutely right. I think a mitigation strategy, again, in the short term, midterm, long term, is something immediate that we need to do.
Great, thank you all.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Ms. Sappy for getting the band together like she did. Never seen such a gathering before, and certainly not to discuss this situation. My name's Mike Carroll, New Garden Township, Pelham Drive. And recently there was a home for sale, yippee, in our neighborhood. Not many come up, but this one did. And they listed it through no less, I guess, source than realtors.com. And a new thing realtor.com has is called environmental risk. And it starts with air quality factor. And it goes in, it talks about some bad days. We get a 3 out of 10, not very good. Says this property is located in an area that will experience a 50% increase in the number of days with poor air quality, where the air quality index is over 100. And then it goes on with graphs and such on the number of days and when it'll happen. I'm just wondering, how do they get such information, if not from you guys? I mean, realtor.com, how would they find that out? How would they even begin to think about it? Do you have any answers for me on that? Do they make calls to you guys, say, hey, how's the air in this area?
So one of the things we've seen over the years is we put out hourly data that we collect from all the site stations we run across the Commonwealth. There are a multitude of sites that take and scrape that data and create their own version of what that is. So I'm not sure how Zillow, what their math is.
Realtor.com.
I'm sorry, my bad. Realtor.com. But I know there are multiple sites we've seen where they will take and pull the data down from the department site and use it for their own purposes. I mean, at this point, it's public data. We have no ability to stop them from doing it. So I don't know what their math is, their algorithm is to come up with that number. So I think the nearest probably PM center is out at the airport at Talking Gettleman. So it's probably where they're extrapolating that from.
If I could follow up on what Nick was saying. So I think you said the air quality index. So the air quality index is based on particulate matter 2.5, so 2.5 microns in size and lower. So that, and then also ozone. Other than that, it doesn't include any other. So hydrogen sulfide isn't even calculated in the air quality index.
I understand that, but an educated consumer may not parse the difference
Totally understand that, yeah.
at all. And of course, we all have houses. Everybody here has houses there. And they start seeing stuff like this online. And we get buyers that try and put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5, even though they're not the same. It looks the same. So this needs to be handled very delicately as far as I'm concerned, so as to protect our properties. Okay, thank you. Thanks all of you.
How you doing again? My question's for the ag department. I know you're supporting the farmers. How far down the chain or do you go? Because I mean, I've grown up in this area and I'm used to the mushroom houses changing their beds and bounding in whatever they do. And I'll have a smelly morning and it was no big deal. But you drive past these compost plants and the smell is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You cannot drive down that road without putting your recirculator on and covering your nose. Do your best practices and recommendations fall to them too? Or are they outside of your purview and your focus more on the actual farms growing the mushrooms versus them providing? the
So again,
compost
back to
for
the
you?
Nutrient Management Act, there's also an odor management component to that.
Mm.
So farms that fall under the definition of needing that odor management plan would be required to get one.
I would say it's not the farms that are actually growing the mushrooms that are one of the primary problems.
point
with
is
me
the
here. It's the actual compost plant that's
composting
making
facility,
the
yeah.
compost that they provide to the farms.
Sure.
Are they under any of your best practices? Are you looking into those?
They're
facilities?
not. However, that point, if they fall under the definition of a normal farming activity because they're producing a product that's necessary to grow a commodity, then they should, potentially be under some definition that we come up with to help mitigate through a BMP, a best management practice.
Okay, so
To your
that's
point,
something you should definitely be aware of because,
Yeah.
like I said, I grew up here. I'm used to the mushroom farms Benning, but the compost plants that are growing exponentially, I mean, it's literally doubled in size the last few years.
Yeah.
Are just a constant smell as they're churning that stuff over and over again to make the compost that's then being sold to the mushroom farms.
It's part of the whole, it has to be
Correct.
part of that
Okay.
solution.
I just want to make sure you're aware of that as part of the.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have to say one more thing. I'm listening to this last few minutes. It's all studies. We're gonna do this, we gotta study that. I guess that's the way Camp Lejeune went, 34 years. They were poisoning people with carbon tetrachloride. But now it was exposed to the public. Same way with Niagara Falls. The same way with Flint, Michigan. Why do we have to have studies and money invested for such a long period of time when the results could be made much faster? But if you're dragging your feet, I guess more money comes across. We're talking a money issue here, not only with what's going on over there, but with the way this is being controlled and operated. You people aren't really, what I'm hearing here is excuse, excuse, and excuse. I don't hear anything decisive in getting anything done. But like I said, Camp Lejeune went on for 34 years, took them 20 to 30 years almost to give it to the public. I lost a friend last week for that from Camp Lejeune. It's not a fun thing to think about, but I'm sitting here, I'm not saying it's gonna as extreme as Camp Lejeune, but there's something going on and you really don't know. You sit here and, well, we got a study here, we're gonna put money over there. That's fine. But get something done. And just as that woman said about her bringing her kids to the playground, this township, prior to Chris Hines being our manager, had to put, I think Steve can verify this, over $60,000 in new playground equipment because of them. Our taxes went up. Why should I be paying for their sins? Think about it.
Microphones. Hi, my name's Deb Schupa. I live, excuse me, on Pelham, right over here in Landenberg. I'm one of the lowest houses, so it can get pretty raunch at times. Been there over 30 years, so we knew mushroom farms were your friends, we knew we were there, but it's definitely gotten worse over the years. I mean, I remember a time when my kids were going to school and when they were in high school, and some of you guys may remember when they put the yellow line down the middle of the road. Do you remember that? And I remember I called the township and I said, why did they put a single yellow line down the middle of the road? And whoever was the township manager at the time said it was because of the mushroom fog was so bad, the school buses couldn't see going around by the pond and so forth. So, I mean, I haven't seen that lately, but I know that was there. I've got the copper pipes, the holes, all that. But my question is, I worked in corporate America for over 40 years. I've done my share of reports and schedules and, Excel spreadsheets and data collection and so forth. But has any of you ever gone to see or smell the data? Not just look at the numbers, because I've done that too. I've been in the insurance industry, the healthcare industry for over 40 years, and people can give me all sorts of data and I can put a pretty report together. But until I go out and experience it, then it sometimes can tell a little bit of a different story. So I guess that's my question is, have any of you then actually looked at that data in real life? And I got a spare bedroom Anybody wants to come and stay for a couple days at my house and see it morning, noon, and night, you are more than welcome, and we'll cook. I mean, I'm serious.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer that from the ag perspective, I mean, we're very engaged with farming operations and have been on farms across the state, including mushroom farms. So we have been, but your point to that is taken.
Okay. Because again, like someone else said before, if we're smelling it, I truly do worry about the worker. I hear them morning, noon, and night. The lights are there. The leaves are down. We can see the whole operation. It's there. And you do wonder, it's like if we're down at the lowest level and you smell it and it's that bad, what is it doing to the workers? And that's a concern for all of us. So, and again, air conditioners, pipes, all that good stuff. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alex von Cook. We own a property on Newark Road. And again, I want to thank Christina Sappi for organizing this evening. I think it's very valuable to have everyone here. My concern is you did an air study apparently, but did you look at other impacts such as impact to the groundwater and the water surrounding this area?
No, we did not. It was an air study only.
Air study only.
Correct.
Would it be a consideration to look at our water?
If I could just speak to that, I know that USDA has been working locally with the County Conservation District for several years to install practices on mushroom operations that address water quality issues. I don't know if there are any associated studies with it, but I do know that they've been working with USDA related to water quality.
Okay, it just may be worthwhile to look at water as well.
Yeah.
And lastly, would it be worthwhile to establish a moratorium on new businesses opening up in this particular industry, in this area? I don't know. I don't know who would have to initiate it. Steve is sort of looking at me from the side. I'm not sure, but I don't know if it would have to come from a township or a county-wide thing or statewide. But again, I think it's something we could look at least a temporary moratorium until the studies come back, and maybe that would speed up the studies too. Who knows?
I think you can ask the supervisor from London Grove about expanding the mushroom. Expanding the program now. And the Attorney General will be in favor of expanding the mushroom. Again, our hands are up.
Ours have grown and it's gotten better, but that was due to an indoor composting ordinance that we put in. And we're kind of proud of our industry right now. I don't know if Dave has anything to been involved in that heavily. My voice is not great.
No, we worked with our local mushroom farms, and we granted them certain zoning exemptions to expand, which made it financially feasible for them to put everything under roof. So in London Grove, we're mostly satisfied with everything, and that's really the key to all this, is getting all that compost under roof. And the key to that is funding. So, is your state rep and state representatives willing to go to bat for your township municipalities and the operations to find the funding it takes to get it under roof? Because that's really what controls everything with that industry. So I've been involved with this issue for 18 years, and it's a critical industry to our community. I'm not entirely happy with what the panel's presenting here today, but I'll tell you, I'm really happy with the partners that we have in the mushroom industry in Lunenburg Township. So,
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
And I guess lastly, if you're looking at the timeline, and I know that was discussed a couple people prior to me stepping up here. It seemed like the problem was in the 90s. It was studied and nothing happened. And obviously complaints have come in since the late 90s and are still coming in as of today. And again, it's being studied. And, we need a conclusion. I think that's what I'm saying. And it can't be, well, we're turning it over to another study, or academia will do it for us, or whatever. I think somebody has to take charge and move forward with it and come to a conclusion. What can be done? Thank you. Hi, my name is Isaiah. I'm on Pelham Drive. I think every question has been asked. So I don't have to go there again. We have a statement in our home. It's don't be a stupid steward. And so I'm here just to basically ask for accountability, which seems kind of like a common thing to be known that holds us true. So is there a way that we could go ahead and schedule another meeting in maybe a month, 2 months, to where we can get back in here again? We can check out more things. I know that we're checking a lot of data and everything. All my kids are in school. If my daughter would come home with a black eye and say, "Dad, the bully beat me up," I would never say, "I need more data. Let's just send you back to school. We'll see if you get beat up again." There's a lot of abused people here, and we feel abused 30 some odd years dealing with it. So just wanting to know if we can have some accountability and maybe call another meeting, maybe in a month. We can come back together, see what we've collected, see what the next step would be.
I'll just offer that you have the commitment of agriculture to be here whenever you want us to be here. I mean, we can schedule a meeting in a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever. You'll have our commitment to be here.
That'd be awesome.
The Mushroom Institute to attend this as well.
We are engaged with the mushroom industry and, it's a fair ask, and certainly we would make that recommendation.
Thank you.
I have a question really for the legislators. I've heard a lot tonight. There seems to be a lot of ambiguity around the mushroom industry. And to me, I look at two simple things. What do they have to comply with and who's enforcing it? And if there's a lot of ambiguity, I've heard best practices, that doesn't mean anything to us as residents. I've heard hands tied. What do they have to comply with? And when I'm looking at the legislators, times change, people change, industries change. Do you have a process to include residents or the public in the mushroom industry? We're not trying to put them out of business. I love mushrooms personally. Always have. We need them. They're good but we need a working solution. And I hear all these representatives, Department of Ag, Department of Health, Department of Environmental Protection. Is there a process in place to legislate? Do you have a process where you can look at a major issue? And I think this is a major issue, to bring people together and say, what can we do to make a change in the law, to make it more streamlined? Like, I'm just looking at the speed limit. It's 55 miles an hour here, and 70, if you go over it, you're breaking it, and it's being enforced. What do they have to comply with, and who's enforcing it? So I just wonder if you have a process in place and how long does that process take?
Well, as we've seen, anything involving the public sector and government takes a long time. And it was deliberately designed to move at a glacial pace so that we don't have inadvertent consequences. Having said that, I think one of the things that's very clear is that we need coordination to get something done, because over the years, government has operated in silos. And, it's 2024, and we can't have one agency working by itself as if it doesn't impact another one. And that's frankly how we've operated for many years. And we can't do that any longer. So I think you all understand that it's time for some change. So I think, my colleagues in the legislature, Senator Kane, Senator Comita, and all of our other colleagues here in the Southeast are committed to working with all of these state agencies, helping to coordinate their communication with each other and with you. And anybody who's not in the room that should be is something that we try to figure out as well. Is that the Attorney General? Is it the Auditor General? Do we need to do something, beyond what we're looking at? But, a lot of the things that govern agriculture were designed years ago, decades ago. And so maybe it is time to take a look at that. I can tell you right now that the people in the mushroom industry want nothing more than to do the right thing, because they do live here. They do raise they might be online. We don't know. And there's some of them in the room. Christy, they need to be involved in the industry, and they want to be. I can tell you that. I'm not taking sides tonight over all of you, believe me, but they have to be part of the solution and they want to be. So I think that's the coordination. When you say, what can we do? That's the solution, is we can bring everybody together to make sure and hold accountable that the results are leading to action.
Right,
So-
but more specifically, what's the process for putting it
Well,
into law?
that's the,
Yeah, no,
that's what the communication has to lead to.
But it sounds, I mean, it's like the analogy that was used earlier with the spaghetti around the plate.
Right. It's well, there are two different routes. Sometimes you go a regulatory route where the agencies can change the regulations, or sometimes it's legislation where they require us to mandate what the changes that they need.
Can't
So
legislators bring that forward?
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If the solutions that are discovered, by looking at the new data, or incorporating other data, when they come down and look at all of this, if it's something that they can change through regulation without going through our process, they'll do that. If it's something that they cannot change within the agency, they need the legislature to legislate, they will say, we need legislation to change this. We introduce it, and it goes through the House, it goes to the Senate, it goes to the governor's office. It's not a short process.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, that could be a lifetime from my perspective.
That's right. And so but those are the two routes. Those are the two routes to action. And once it's, in their statute to comply with, then it's enforceable. So does anyone else have any other questions? It's 9:15. We're happy to take more questions, but it doesn't look like there are any more. I'm very interested in what you've done in Lund Grove. My question is, did you do an indoor composting ordinance yourselves?
Penn Township did one just before us. And I will say too, it was a partnership between the township and the composters, let's say, and the mushroom growers. It was getting to the point where it was getting very difficult to put a shovel in the ground. It was a fight. And I think it's been a cooperative effort.
And did you use, that's okay, and I'm so sorry to make you talk, because I can tell. So did you use any state funding for that, or was it a combination of state, federal, and local funding? How did you put that together?
What I consider to be the model for the solution to this is, making it financially feasible for the operation to go undercover, right?
Mhm.
That particular operation, all we had to do was get some zoning, right? Some expansion possibilities, and in return, we got everything to cover. Everybody's happy. The neighbors are happy, everybody's happy. That's the solution. Not every operation can make it financially feasible to do that. So that's where grant money comes into play. You have to have grant money. You have to have money from the state or Fed to make this feasible. The only way.
Well, thank you so much. That's a stakeholder. Whoever was asking what a stakeholder is, that's what a stakeholder is. That's who we work with.
There is a wood type.
Mhm.
Right? It's a completely environmental. It's not just air. It's not just hydrogen sulfide. It's water. It's passive composting. It's the whole 9 yards. So you can't look at one without the other.
Okay.
So tonight we're looking at one particular piece of the puzzle, but putting it under roof essentially covers all of it.
Thank you so much.
And if they did it and it worked, here's that plan, and why can't we replicate it in your garden?
There was no bottle. We did it. I mean, that's just it. There was no plan. We reached out to the facility. We worked with them. We talked to them. We said, what can we do? And we got feedback from them, and we said, okay, we can make some concessions with our zoning. They wanted to expand, and we made the concessions. So it was that simple in that particular case. That's not a one size fits all. I mean, every single operation that's in this industry needs a different piece of the puzzle. It's a recipe that takes not just the supervisors here, I know, talking with some of the people that I've known over the years, they work really diligently on an issue. They brought it here today. That's tremendous. You know, it takes not just that, but it takes the state representatives. It takes your congressional leader. Okay? I mean, it's, you know, when it comes to water, it's really a federal issue. So where's your congressperson at, right? So it's not just here today. It's not just with your state representatives, it's with your congressional people. It's the whole 9 yards. So you have to be able to kind of work every lever to get to the point where you can get to the table and say, what can we do? And every operation is going to have a different need, want, you know, so you've got to be flexible. So it's easy for me to recognize and discuss this with the, in Musselman, because I own I own my own business, right? So it comes down to money. I mean, that's ultimately what it is, right? So if it takes $1 million to build a structure, to put everything under roof, and they can't recoup that in a 3 to 5 or 10-year return, they're not going to consider it. Well, yeah, don't waste the money on the studies.
But to
You know,
your point,
I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this study here, and I want to see the actual data, right? Because you're seeing means and mediums and all that stuff. What were the spikes? I mean, the spikes, I mean, you know, that's the way it comes. And in order to control that, it needs to be under roof.
But to your point as well, every operation is a bit different, and for some that may not be financially feasible. So we need to have a suite or a range of practices that we could recommend, right?
So how did you pick those three? I had no idea that we had an air quality sensor in London Grove Township.
Yeah, I didn't pick.
And that I got to be honest with you, that irritates me. I should have known about that, right?
Yeah.
My residents should have known about that. What made you pick those particular points for those sensors?
I didn't.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Def-
from the 98 study, they put the sensors in the same exact place?
No. No, we didn't put the sensors in the same spot. So the one at the Avon Grove School was the only one we put. There was a similar location to the previous study. So one, we use completely different technology. The technology we used back in the 90s doesn't really exist, and it's not as accurate anymore. So we wanted to have that touch point with that school, and we struggled, so we kind of shoehorned it into a spot that really didn't fit.
But I'm not a scientist, and I don't know the issue that well, but I know it well enough to know that if you really want to find the point, the source point, you don't spread out the sensors that way, right? And you would probably need 12 to 15 sensors, you know, around what you would consider possible source points. With wind detectors and the whole 9 yards. You don't just throw 3 sensors out far apart like that and say, yeah, we've had this, that, and the other thing. I mean, that's.
Right. So again, the point of the study was not to identify an individual source. It was to get a representative sample of what's out there, trying to quantify what we didn't know.
Yeah, I would just want to say a couple things. First, thanks to everyone for coming. I think we're heading down the right path. I do think that the suggestion of having another meeting, and possibly it's just with the Department of Agriculture for the next meeting, we can let DEP and the Board of Health continue to work down the path they're going. But I do think that having a face from the Department of Agriculture is very important for all of us here in the room. The intensity of the compost that is done in New Garden Township compared to what's done in London Grove, I'm going to just take a guess at it. We're about 40%. They might be 12% of what's done here. That's the problem. We need help. We could put an ordinance in place, but we would have the Attorney General down here saying that you're violating the acre law. I promise you. Without cooperation from Department of Agriculture, best management practices, it's going to be continued clash of residents versus agriculture.
Yeah, I think we need to be at the table with you and with the industry to have a conversation, and we're willing to do that and want to do that and want to engage with you. We don't want this to be the end of our presence here.
Yeah, no, it has to be. I mean, it's 65% of the $2.1 billion budget line item in the state's agriculture, what they assume is revenue for the state of Pennsylvania. It's the largest cash crop. And down on this end, exempting or taking Berks County out, we're every bit of 65 to 68% of that, based on the pounds that are grown here. New Garden Township has 90% of the distribution in southern Chester County, all of the repacking facilities. And as I said, at least 40 to 45% of the compost is made within a square mile of the building. Then there's the other issue with spent compost, where we bring it, we pile it. We know that suspended solids need air. Without air, it goes anaerobic, releases gas of some sort. So that's a whole nother issue that really truly needs to be looked at, because pounds in, pounds out. What goes in the house has to come out of the house. And as I understand it, it's still DEP, it's still an air quality, and it's still agriculture, even if it's dirt. So, but again, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. We can wait on that until he gathers more data. Anyone else?
Last call. Anyone?
So I won't comment on the data because, but I was just going to comment on the process of gathering data. So Lorenzo Chena, I'm from Westchester University. So I want to let everybody know, I think that New Garden Township should be recognized for investing money into funding a study and getting more data. More data is always better than less data. And also the commitment to invest, another 1.5 million. Some of you may be concerned and say, why don't we use this money for solutions? But in reality, as a researcher, your work is to try and come out with what is the truth, right? And so you have to have instruments that can be trusted. And it takes time to remove noise from data and then find out where are the best spots to collect it, what is the best approach. So all these things take time. And the whole process of just coming up with a reliable set of data is time consuming, and it needs resources and time. So, the investment of the money is much needed for gathering this information. I think, from what I've actually been listening online while I was getting here, I think part of the frustration comes from fear that even if we were to find out that there are dangerous exposure levels, then what can we do if nothing can be done to then enforce regulations or to commit to a change? And so probably part of the frustration that is felt here is that we feel a little powerless here and thinking, well, now we can gather more information, but what's going to happen next? And so those are some of the big questions that probably need to be addressed in how can this be regulated and how can this problem be solved? And the last comment I wanted to make, there were some questions about the corrosion with hydrogen sulfide. And although understandably that is outside of the scope of a study that is just measuring levels of hydrogen sulfide, corrosion is well established in the literature that it does occur when hydrogen sulfide reacts with moisture in the air. It actually turns into sulfuric acid, which then reacts with iron, copper, or any metal and can lead to corrosion. I've actually observed it on some of my instruments that are outside, and I've been outside for just about a year now, that are fairly quickly tarnishing and becoming corroded. So there's no surprise that you're observing that with your equipment. Now, again, our studies are not measuring the level of corrosion just stating that this is a well-known and well-established fact of reaction with hydrogen sulfide that can be found in the literature.
Thank you.
I think no one wants to create problems or call or be a part of a fight or, start one. But a big thing is that we obviously have stated in many ways that we need help. So we're looking for our local government, local agencies to help. So one of those big things that's going to help us in this long journey that we take, if it takes that long, is to have, you mentioned earlier, Christine, that the industry wants to work with us. I think it's really important that they come to these meetings, that the next meeting that we have, there are representatives specifically from the local areas, Laurel Valley Farms in particular, right behind my neighborhood here in Landenberg Hunt. Be here, show us your face. When these questions come up, we want to see how you react. We want to see what your intentions are. I don't really want to hear it from a representative. So, and I appreciate it though. But I think it's important that we see the industry stand in front of us and say, we would love to help make it a better environment, make the Constitution work for all of us, and just show us that you're here to work with us and that things will get better.
Thank you. So I'm going to wrap up here and just say thank you all so much for coming. I mean, this meeting with the state agencies, I think has, has been stated previously, the beginning, they came to share the data that we asked for. We asked for this, and now they've come to present it to us. And I think it's the beginning of how we address this issue. I think, we've invited everybody, all the stakeholders, and I believe there are people online. So I can't tell you that the industry is not represented tonight. They're probably online listening, but I don't know for sure. So we will definitely stay in touch through the township. I know Chris will talk to you in a second here about that, how they communicate to you. I have an email list through my office that we started years ago for all of you that were concerned about this issue. If you have not signed up for that, please feel free to call my office or go on my website and sign that contact form, and we can stay in touch with you as well through that. But I know that my colleague, Senator Kane, and I, and again, Senator Comita and our other representatives in the area care very much about what happens here, not just, in New Garden Township, but regionally as well. It's impacting everybody. So thank you again for coming. Thank you for your questions. And thank you, New Garden, again.
I have no other questions. Thank you all very much and appreciate for coming tonight. Thank you.